Hello and welcome to the SuperShow podcast. It is 2022. It's great to be back. Happy New Year to everyone out there, and Happy New Year, especially, Jamie, to you.
Happy New Year to you too, buddy. It's good to see your beautiful smiling face once again.
Yours too. Thank you very much for being here. Unfortunately, Chris can't be with us because he is not feeling very well. There are lots of stuff going around at the moment, as I'm sure everyone knows about, and we will do our traditional sort of like welcome to the new year style podcast when Chris is feeling a little bit better. Hopefully that'll be next week. But Jamie and I thought that we would, we'd get together and we'd have a chat about some games, and we'd drop you some news, and we'd have a little, get together in this, what is it, January the 6th. So
big time.
Hopefully this will keep you going until we get that early sort of like welcome to the year, proper full on Super Show podcast. Jamie, I got quite a few games for Christmas and my birthday, which also happened in that little holiday period. And I know you did as well, so I'm looking forward to hearing about the games that you got a bit later on.
That's the fucked up thing about having like 3 weeks between podcast recordings and having so much time off work during that interim, is that all we do is play games and watch movies, so that we come back here. Half this podcast is us going to be arguing about whether or not Metroid Dread is good. Let's be upfront about it.
It probably will. And you know, what's funny is when I was thinking about doing the pod, and I was thinking like that, I just really want to talk to Jamie about what we thought about Metroid Dread. Like, we'll record it and we'll put it online for other people to watch.
See, that's the whole smokescreen we run here, is that none of this is for the audience, it's all for us. This is our excuse to sit down and argue with friends. Whether or not people listen, that's just a perk.
Absolutely. But hey, as Jamie and I have a little discussion / argument / convo about what's good and what's bad and what we've been playing over the holiday season, if you disagree with us, or you agree with us, or you just like to have a chat with us, you can reach out to us on YouTube and Twitter at SuperShowPod. And also, if you're watching this on one of those platforms in video form, you can also check us out on podcast only platforms. I'm talking Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts, really. We are ubiquitous. We spread ourselves very thin all over the shop. But if you want a little special treat and you want to get like an old school vibe when you listen to us, you can also hear us at paisleyradio.com, because we are live on Thursdays at 10 p.m. and it repeats on Mondays at 10 p.m. So we're pretty much everywhere. You can get us all the time, whenever you want.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, if it's your first time, we are kind of a gaming podcast, aren't we? We try to stay on course, but sometimes we sort of lose our way a little bit and we just start talking about random stuff.
It happens.
It happens a lot, but it's fun, so we do it. Jamie, I'd like to go straight in with a comment of the week, because I think that might set us up for the rest of the show. This comes in from, I don't know how to say this, Damnate Cockburn.
That's one of those names.
I hate.
No, see, that's one of those names that I've been reading for years, and I've never said it out loud, so I'm just going to leave that one to you.
Damnate Cockburn. I reckon it's Damn I Hate Cockburn, or something like that.
I mean, anyway, I would hate Cockburn too, were a regular feature of my life.
Yeah, that's not like, it's not something anyone's going to like. Oh no, okay, I'm not kink shaming. Maybe some people like it.
But hang on a second, is cockburn like carpet burn on your cock? Is that like going down a slide cock first and having your skin fucked up?
I was thinking of it more like just a random burning sensation, like maybe maybe a chili sauce on the hand. You didn't wash it.
Okay, see, yeah, now we're talking about chili sauce getting in the chaps area. I don't like that insinuation whatsoever.
You are a rugby boy, as I was back in the day, and
what are you about to say about my penis?
There was always the horror story. Maybe this is like an apocryphal tale that stopped people from doing it, but every single season, we all shared this same story, which was make sure after you've put the deep heat all over your legs to keep your legs nice and warm in the winter, to wash your hands well, because there was always one boy last year who didn't wash his hands properly, and then he went to the toilet and you could hear the screams from the car.
Yeah, that's why I was always more of a deep freeze man when I could manage, because that was just a spray in a can, much more preferable and much harder to freeze your cock.
Yes,
no pun intended.
But the deep heat was like because it was like a gel that you.
Exactly. Yeah,
you rub it all over. It's really bad for you as well, apparently, because it brings the. I don't know. This probably isn't true. People always said what it actually does is bring the blood to the surface of your skin, so you feel warmer, but actually it cools you down. So you should.
Oh right, is that like how when you want to cool down, you should take a hot shower? Like the reverse psychology kind of thing.
I don't know. I don't. Well, because I suppose when you're cold, your blood vessels on the outside constrict in order to conserve heat and keep it inside, because you don't want your blood going to the surface, because then obviously you're going to lose heat. And I think the idea is that if you use deep heat, it puts the blood to the surface, so that the cold weather takes more of your heat away, so you actually get colder in the long run.
Weird.
I don't know.
I did some Googling around this stuff because one of the reasons I used to hate going to the gym, and I know it's hard to believe that someone like me ever went, but it was going to the gym, doing a good workout, getting kind of hot because that's what happens. You get in a cold shower because you think I need to cool off, and then I'm out, and by the time I'm getting dressed again, my body temperature is still sky high, and I'm sweating new sweat as I'm putting my socks on, and I'm like, fuck this.
I used to do the same thing. I used to think I'm really hot, I'll take a tepid shower, but you're absolutely right. It's the worst thing you can do, because then it kind of makes, I guess, all your pores, your blood vessels shrink a bit, and then you get really hot on the inside. Yeah. And then 20 minutes later, you're right, you're sweating buckets.
It's mental. I hated it.
Work. I reckon hot shower. That's what you need to do, and then just take your time. Don't rush. Yeah,
taking your time is a big one.
Ease out of that whole thing.
Oh, I thought you were going to end that sentence on hole.
No. Okay. Ease out of the hole. Just plop. Anyway, let's get to this comment from Cockburn. He says, you guys got to release at least one of these gems a month. They really are incredibly fun to both hear and watch. I'm hoping that outside SuperShow Life allows you guys time together for some more brilliant voiceovers in 2022. Happy New Year to everyone. And he was, of course, alluding to a few old school ATG style 6-list videos that we put out over December. We did most memorable songs in games, worst things to happen in gaming this year, and the best games of 2021. So if you haven't watched any of those videos, head over to the YouTube channel, check them all out. They're only about 10 minutes, 13 minutes long, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and enjoy some listicle voiceover gold.
And something a gold that hopefully we do get a chance to come back to. I liked that Mr. Cockburn specifically made mention of outside SuperShow Life allowing us the time to get together for voiceovers, because that is genuinely probably one of, if not the biggest roadblocks to getting things like that done, is can we all meet up and get together? Can we record? When we've recorded, how are we editing and who's editing? But we'll see.
Yeah, because we don't, because this is the thing, because when we record these, obviously these are remote, but when we do the voiceover stuff, we like to get together and do it together. And last time you guys came to my gaff, and I live 30 miles away from you both, so it's quite a journey for you to travel. And it does. We have to make all that stuff work. So hopefully though, we will get a chance to do it again in the very near future, because I don't know about you, but I had a lot of fun doing it, Jamie. So
it was fun. It was fun. I think I said it in previous weeks, even listening back to our recordings as we were editing those videos and editing the voiceover specifically. There's a lot of fun to be had in that process. I'm glad we did it. And
me too.
Hope people got a kick out of it.
And one of the reasons we actually did it was because we wanted to give something back to our awesome fans, and especially our awesome patrons. I always get that wrong, who support us over at patreon.com/SuperShow. And this is a great time to give a shout out to some of the people right now. So you'll see some names on screen. But I'll also like to give a shout out to Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Dark Silhouette, episode 85, 33 minutes, 20 seconds. It took 15 weeks for someone to get the joke. Thank you, Peter. Jesper Camden Nilsson, Javella Cujo, Mindful Pig, Anthropic, Mr. Anthropic, Nathan Pears, Pastors Guild, Scary Omen, Starfall Kid, and the big dogs. They are Brett Z, Doppler, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Book Read, Manuel, Manly Manscaped Man, Guerrero, Peaswad, and the Uncaged. Thank you so much to all of our patrons for supporting us, for getting us through another year of being able to do this. Yes. Long may it continue.
Thank you very much. Jonesy, have you contracted COVID since we've started this podcast? Since we started recording?
I haven't. Why?
Just your throat started sounding a bit raspy there. I couldn't try.
It is a little bit.
I thought you were trying to maybe do a sexy thing, especially for the patrons. Either that or Omicron has infested your household just in the last 15 minutes.
No, I think it's just it's these late nights over the holidays and stuff finally getting to me. And as I told you before this, I had a cheeky little nap before we did this. Unintentional cheeky nap.
Yeah.
But,
wait, so genuine question. Do you tend to lose sleep over the festive period based on regular schedule? Really?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because the problem is, because I've got young kids that always wake up at a certain time, right? So they're always up at 7:30 every day. And then over Christmas, like I want to say Christmas night, we were wrapping presents, my wife and I, until about 3:30. And then the kids woke up at 6:30 because they were really excited.
Yeah.
So then that's obviously 3 hours sleep that we got was destroyed for Christmas Day. But then it happened a few times after that as well, because then we had, like, you know, you stay up, you have a few drinks, and then you chat to people, you go out, whatever. And like I said, it's like Christmas, my birthday, New Year's. It's like bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, I guess for your family, it is one thing after another, and lots of reasons to celebrate. Yeah, it can be a tiring time. I have a very different experience because my family is kind of like split in half, but they are also quite isolated in that my wider family never really gets brought into the proceedings. And I also have a situation where neither side of my family, for different reasons, drink at all. So my Christmas and New Year's is entirely sober and in very low key. And on the one half of the family, the overwhelming majority of the people who are there are young children who have to go to bed like before midnight anyway. So
Right.
Not only do I gain and claw back a dramatic amount of sleep over this period, but do you want to know the other fucked up thing? In weighing myself around like mid, sort of like maybe 2/3 of the way through December, and weighing myself like 2 days ago, I lost about 8 pounds, more than half a stone over the festive period. Do you know why? Because I go back to my parents' house, and all of a sudden, I'm not eating like Domino's and Monster and energy drinks. I'm eating food. Like, because even on Christmas Day, like the idea of my mum cooking like a chicken or potatoes or vegetables, and she makes me eat vegetables, it's like the most nutrients that my body's had in months. So my body's like, hang on a second, we're eating regular meals at regular times, and it's all actual produce. So I just
Did your mum get you to eat a Brussels?
Not a Brussels sprout. I have choice of vegetables, but I have to eat vegetables. I think over the last 2 weeks, I've eaten peas, I've eaten carrots, I've eaten broccoli, I've eaten sweet corn.
I love that your mum treats you how I treat my toddler.
I never grew up, I think that's why.
You have to eat one of them. You don't have to eat all of them. You can pick, but you have to eat.
I think she thinks that that she still has a toddler because jumping ahead a little bit, not going to start the discussion now, but we've already hinted at the fact that Jonesy and I have both played some Metroid Dread over the past couple of weeks. I asked my mum for Metroid Dread because, again, even at the age of 28, I'm not above asking for Christmas presents that are just video games. And I don't know if you, I don't know who got you Metroid Dread or where they got it from, or if there were like stock issues. It was my mum. There you go, perfect. But my mum had difficulty getting it. Apparently it was something to do with like there was a version on Amazon that was going in and out of stock, and the one that was there seemed like it was German, she wasn't sure. So she went to Game, which is a UK video game retail establishment. And if you'll allow me to back away from the mic for 1 second, I apologise for the gap in the audio. But she got me this. This is the size of the copy of Metroid Dread that I got. And like there's nothing in there that's like of any real value. I've only just played the game, but like it's for anyone that can't see, it's like it's bigger than my head.
As a comparison of the size of the game cartridge to the size of the box.
Well, that's the thing. The first thing I did when I got home from my mum's is I opened that massive thing. I took just the cartridge out, put it in my case where I keep all the cartridges, and got on with my life.
Please tell me that they've like affixed the game cartridge right in the middle of that big old box.
No, there was actually a sealed copy of the game in that box that was in there. Right, okay. There's a steel book. And like some fucking postcards, the usual shit they put in there. But yeah, imagine what it was like. Again, you're surrounded because my brother's 25 and he's like an adult. He's getting like socks and cologne and a shirt, and I'm just sat next to him opening the world's biggest Metroid Dread. And then my uncle was there and he asked me if it was Meccano, and I'm like, oh, this is going so wrong.
Meccano, that's great. To be the only reason I ask for that sort of stuff for people because I'm like, there's nothing else. If I wanted anything else, I'd get it for myself. So it's just when people say, "What do you want?" It's like it's an easy thing to say, "Oh, I'll have this." But I will say it's getting tricky nowadays because you can't a lot. I can't really say, "Oh yeah, if you just get me a game," because games are like £70. If you talk
it's
about
true,
PlayStation
actually.
5
it's
or whatever.
true.
So I think next Christmas will be the first Christmas when I don't ask for any games because it would just be too out of order to kind of say, Yeah, I'd love a couple of games, but
Yeah.
I did. My mum did the great thing of. So I said I'd asked for Call of Duty Vanguard. Well,
Mm.
and
It's a great Christmas game. It's a great Christmas from mum game.
well, my wife got it for me for Christmas, and she told my mum, "Oh, I don't get it because I've got him Call of Duty." But then my mum, or she said, "I've got him Vanguard," and then my mum went and bought me Call of Duty, not realizing that. And then what I actually said to her like after, like, "Oh, thanks so much. I actually already got it. So if you can I return it and like get something else?" And she's like, "Oh, why? Oh, what was it I got you that you already had?" I said, "Oh, Vanguard." And she was like, "What's that?" And I was Call of Duty. And she was like, "Oh, okay." But it always reminds me of the thing with the advert with the mum who goes into the game and is like, "Is it PlayStation 5? No, he's got an egg box."
Yeah, that happened to my brothers this year. They got a Series X for Christmas, and
Nice.
funny messaging my dad in a panic on Christmas Eve, like, what's the difference between the S and the X? What do you mean it doesn't have a disc drive?
Yeah, what do I buy for them?
Yeah, literally.
See, these are the problems that people have to deal with, as they get older and the gaming industry starts to become a little bit more inaccessible. But Jamie,
Yeah.
there are some older people who are not finding things inaccessible and are still finding them very accessible. I'm talking about Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss.
I was wondering where you're going with that. Okay, yeah.
Because you and I both watched The Matrix Resurrections as well in the little break that we've had from podcasting. Like we said, we've both also played Metroid Dread. So I'll tell you what, here we go. Why don't you quickly kick us off with what you've been doing by talking about the other things, and then we can both have a chat about Matrix and Metroid Dread.
I will say that, speaking of movies, I did manage to go out and see Spider-Man, because I was so paranoid about that being spoilt for me in one form or another that I was like, I just have to go and see it. Have you seen it yet?
I have not seen it.
Okay, so you haven't seen it. I think Chris has, but obviously he's not here. So maybe that's one, if we do have a solid chat about that, we give it another week. And then that means, we won't spoil anything when we do talk about it, but just lets everyone get on the same page. I want to give a quick shout out to a game that was actually one of the first games I played after Christmas, but was actually something I bought myself, and that's Ready or Not, which I picked up on Steam, currently in early access. Just one of these games that I opened up the Steam store, having seen someone stream it. I was like, what the hell is this? And I looked at it, it was like, this is a game that I've been wanting for fucking years. This is a game I've been asking for. As someone that's been eyeing up the version of SWAT 4 that's on GOG for God knows how many years. So Ready or Not is basically a first-person tactical shooter that is something of a spiritual successor to the SWAT series. So it's don't think of it like Rainbow Six Siege. It is PvE. It's setting up different scenarios on different maps, and it's a co-op experience. Steph Murphy, friend of the podcast, kindly joined me on my first excursions into the game, and I really like it. Even for something that's early access, it's not that rough. It's pretty well featured. It had all the things that kind of get me giddy about these kind of experiences, whether it's the kind of choices you have in your loadout and the way you customize your loadout, whether it's the nature of the maps. Like there's one that's just a very simple, hey, this is a slightly rundown house that kind of looks like it could have been a drug den. Like that's my dream map for these kind of games. And that slow kind of tactical consideration of like, we're going to move really slowly, we're going to go door by door. Like Steph and I did a setup where he had one of these mirror guns that could see underneath doorways to see if there's anyone on the other side. And I had like a big riot shield, so I would go in first. And I had a taser as my secondary, so I could tase people. And we were just... It seems like it's going to be really fun, assuming they support this game over the years to kind of use different combinations of tools and people filling out different roles within that SWAT style outfit to try and overcome these very intriguing challenges. It's just my kind of game. It's
a game series that I've always wanted to be able to play and be good at, but I have never been able to do. Like I'm just too impatient. I don't have the I don't know what the word is. I don't have the the wherewithal. I'm not with it enough to kind of go, okay, I'm going to plan out this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to carefully progress. I'm going to do these things I should do. I'm much too gung ho when it comes to this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is it a game that you cannot be gung ho in?
You cannot be gung ho. You die unbelievably quickly.
Right.
and there's nothing you can do once you're dead but spectate your teammates until they're dead too. No matter
Right.
how long the mission is, it's very focused on like, this is the shit you're going to do and you're going to do it right. It's quite a strict game in that sense. Not strict in terms of how you want to approach things and how you want to customize the way you want to complete a certain objective or approach a certain scenario, but strict in terms of like, no, they're a very real failure kind of sort of criteria. And if you fail, you fail. And Steph and I failed a lot, surprisingly.
I think this is a game I'd quite enjoy watching watching people stream.
Yes.
To enjoy it that way, because especially if it's someone who's like who's a bit more considered, knows what they're doing. Like I'm sure I could watch you play it. You said Steph, and I did think Steph Murphy, who runs away at every opportunity and doesn't keep you informed, doesn't tell you what he's doing.
Yeah, there wasn't too much of that. Luckily, I think when it's just me and Steph, and he knows that because there's no one listening, we're not live streaming it or anything, I'll get angry at him if I need to. I think he kind of
right.
he was well behaved.
Okay, cool.
We didn't have any fights.
That's good to hear.
Real fights or virtual. I was hoping to try and convince you to buy it. I was hoping this was going to be like another random chorus situation where I just come on the podcast, talk about a game, and you bought it half an hour later. But I don't think it's going that direction at the moment.
I'll have to have a look at it and see what it looks like. But yeah, it sounds like something that I would just be absolutely terrible at.
That's fair enough. The other thing I played though, and this is just as much not your cup of tea, but in a completely different reasons. I actually finished Life is Strange: True Colors today, which
okay, you finished it. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I finished it. Well, because I remember when it came up a couple of times before the end of the year, it always felt like you were surprised that I hadn't played it yet.
Yeah,
and now
for sure.
I ticked it off the list. Do you know what? I was talking to you boys the other day, similar because there was a similar overlap with Metroid Dread about how I have this thing at the start of the year where I'm kind of, you get very like introspective, don't you? You start thinking about, our new year, how old am I going to be this year, and what am I going to do, and all this kind of stuff. And I was finding lots of different pieces of media, whether they were films or TV shows or games, that I was trying to interact with in that time, a bit impenetrable. Like everything was, like I was being hyper analytical and sort of a bit cynical about everything I was playing, not just seeing things for what they were and kind of like breaking them down in a way that wasn't particularly helpful. That happened with Spider-Man, and it kind of started happening with Life is Strange, where I booted up the game and played that first chapter, and this is all the game now is all delivered at once,
Right.
as
Not
opposed to being episodic like it used to be. Even though it still kind of feels like maybe it should be episodic, but that's probably a bigger conversation.
I've only played a little bit of Life is Strange, and I haven't played like True Colors, but I feel like the episodic nature is a good idea with this sort of game because it means that you can attack it in chunks rather than trying to sit down and
Exactly.
It can be a bit of an emotional slog as well, right? And it's a very like
it's an emotional slog, and also like from a gameplay, there's not that many mechanics in a Life is Strange game. You're looking at objects and hearing a bit of voiceover as like she goes, "Oh,
right.
That's a picture of my family. I wonder how they're doing."
It's more like you're living the story of the characters, right? And you're trying to get your way through that and experience it.
And that stuff rubbed up against me in a bad way early on, as well as a few other kind of nitpicky things that I had. Like, this is set. So for anyone that doesn't know, you play as a character called Alex Chen, who has been in like child protective services and different organizations like that for basically the majority, or at least the recent part of her childhood, and is now finally going out on her own and is going to go and live with and sort of reunite with her older brother, who she hasn't seen for 8 years, who now lives in this sort of like very quaint mining town in Colorado. And you get there and it's just everything, and I'm not saying that Life is Strange has ever been, like gritty or real, but everything's like really picturesque, and every single person has like dashing model good looks, and yet their personalities are this sort of like weird mix of charm and quirky, and they've got a sense of humor, and there's like an independent record store, and every single person in the town owns a vinyl player, and there's independent radio stations that just play indie rock, and it's like, what the fuck have I like rolled up on? And even in the Life is Strange Season 1 high school setting, they were able to say, like, these are the bullies, and these are the like the preppy rich kids, and these are like the rejects, and these are the nerds, and like those archetypes. And there's no real archetypes in the town that True Colors is set in, and it kind of just felt like a Twin Peaks populated by hipsters, where everyone loves each other and nothing really ever goes that wrong.
Right, is it almost like hipster heaven? Like,
yeah, it's hipster heaven, but then the problem is it's hipster heaven that you arrive at, and immediately, because it's a video game, within 45 minutes, something goes horribly, drastically, like uncontrollably wrong, because the game needs a plot. And I was like, oh god, this all feels a bit heavy-handed and a bit like, I don't know, nothing was sticking. Everything was just like rolling off me. And the more I stuck with it and the more I went back to it, the more I enjoyed it, because you do get to come to terms with those characters and get more familiar with those characters. And it does, love it or loathe it, it does that very Life is Strange thing of like, oh, the overarching story here is kind of like a young adult detective story investigating the mysterious death of this individual. But also, like, we're going to talk about depression and anxiety. We're going to talk about, mental health, and we're going to talk about the pros and cons of medication to deal with mental health problems. We're going to talk about the US foster care system, and we're going to talk about the legalization of marijuana, and we're going to just every single like hot topic of the century. It's got something to say on, and sometimes they're trying to
pump all that stuff into the game. Which I can imagine how that, if you try and cover too much, because often I suppose the way that games do it works quite well when it's woven into the narrative, and you can just like enjoy it as part of the game. But if you're trying to put too much of that stuff into a game, you get to a weird place where it comes too quick fire, and it feels like they're just trying to tack on subjects and try and add messaging to games, like maybe. It kind of ruins the story.
There are definitely moments where it's like, oh wow, you felt like you had to say, like, one of the examples, and it sounds like I'm picking on it, it's not, it's just genuinely one of the most egregious examples. It's like, oh, the writers felt like they needed to say something about, trans people, and so there's a like throwaway, it's not even a throwaway line, it's a throwaway voicemail from a trans character who in their one line of dialogue in the entire 10-hour game mentions the fact that they're trans. And it's not saying that that's like, it just felt it felt like a little
that's
bit
almost
like,
worse.
I know,
but that is almost worse, right? Because at least if you had a character who was, then that's fine. That's like a character in the game. It kind of makes sense. I imagine there's no reason in the game that you couldn't have like any number of characters who are.
Exactly.
But then to have one character phone up on a voicemail and leave a voicemail, it seems just tacked on.
Yeah.
And there's a weird sense when companies do that, because you think about developers, they're still companies right at the end of the day. There does have a little bit of a weird thing of like, are they just including this so they can say, hey, look, we're one of the good guys. We've included that in our game. And you're like, have you though? Or if you just put it in there so that people don't moan about you?
It toes the line very, I wasn't going to say carefully. It does sometimes give you the feeling of, okay, the Life is Strange developers had a checklist of, topics that needed a light shone on them in one way or another. It's just, it's more effective in some places than others. And there are also cases of like...
Is there a random neighbour who's like starts to just hear like gunfire and then you have to like rush out and then there's some weird thing where like guns are bad and he accidentally shoots himself in the foot?
There's actually, considering that guns and gun ownership, like there are characters in the games who own in the game that owns a gun, but there's no gun ownership kind of commentary at all. There's also almost zero race commentary for what like that. So there are big things that they didn't touch on. There are prominent conversations about, and even choices from a gameplay term about sexuality, but it's never again an explicit topic that the characters discuss. So some things like and there's also like an interesting thing where they combine like a difficult or a touchy subject with choices. Like, for example, there's a thing very early on where a character passes away and they have a wake, and there's a character in the town who has, it seems like is in the early stages of suffering from dementia, and she misses the wake because she doesn't remember this person has died. And you have to choose, do you tell them or not? Like, do you tell them that not only have that they've forgotten this person had died, but they didn't go to the funeral because they just forgot, and like weird stuff like that. And like another story beat that I just didn't see coming that was like, and it's kind of like raw, but it probably happens, like what happens when a parent comes to terms with the fact that for one reason or another they hate their child, like an infant child. No, serious. Like,
Oh,
it's
wow.
not, they can't help it, but because of the things that child is involved in and what they're
an infant. What can they be involved in?
one, not intentionally, but
He's in a gang at nursery. He's in a gang.
No,
He's,
like a child creating a series of events that end in something tragic, and a parent not being able to remove their child from the fact that they were the catalyst for a series of events that ended in something tragic, and that it's almost like the pain of that tragedy outweighing their love for that child. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right.
It would be spoilers to expand on it. But, like, there were moments like that where you're like, whoa.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's good. I liked it. I genuinely liked it by the end. It's
So
got
I think midpoint when I asked you about it, you said you were feeling like you said you were feeling quite critical about it. You weren't thinking it was you weren't feeling that positive about it. But to hear that you finished it and you think it's good is maybe you've put some of that New Year woe behind you.
Yeah, I think I have, and I think the characters helped. Like, there is going to be a bit of a Stockholm syndrome effect with a Life is Strange game. You are going to spend time around characters like them and want to spend more time with them, and like you get into weird things of like wanting the best for them and like making decisions for them, even though they're fucking virtual characters whose lives end when your time with the game ends. But there was some effective stuff. There were people I liked. There were story twists that I liked. There were story twists I didn't like. They did the classic, hey, it's the penultimate episode of this Life is Strange game, we need to do a big twist now moment.
Right.
And I didn't see it coming, but still, it was like, oh, one of these again. It was better than the one in the first Life is Strange, but yeah. I liked it, though. I liked it. I did like it.
At some point, I need to go back and at least try and get into the series, because I do feel like it's a series I've missed out on, but I tried originally with the episodic ones, and I was just I just got bored. Really, it wasn't that there was anything wrong with the games. It, like say the gameplay, the mechanics, and the nature of the game. I just found it a little bit like there was nothing making me want to go back and just turn that game on.
I think that this game suffers from the fact that I think the boredom is arguably exacerbated because there's not even like a point where the episode ends and you wait for the next one to come out.
Right,
it just keeps going.
I suppose you've got to play it enough that it gets its hooked into you like a series. And that's why the episodic kind of thing works for it, because then you might find yourself going, I wonder what happens next in the story.
Yeah.
But if it's just a big game, then you might not, it might not hook you enough, because obviously episodes are built in a certain way, so they have a structure so that they have like maybe a cliffhanger at the end, maybe something that you want to find out in the next episode. But if it's just one whole game, because you can choose when to turn it off.
They do still do that. They do still do chapters with like cliffhangers and title cards, but it just there's nothing. It just rolls on. It feels like there should be a harder stop there.
You should make yourself turn it off.
It does do one of those menus where it's like, oh, here's the choices you made compared to the rest of the world.
Right. Oh, cool. Do you have the option to take a selfie at the funeral, like with the casket in the background?
No, you don't get an option. I'm trying to think. You don't really get to do anything that fucked up, because your character that you play as is very. Let's say mild-mannered,
right,
troubled, and sort of slowly coming out of their shell. I didn't mention that the sort of supernatural ability in this game is that your character is an empath and can read the emotions of other people. And yeah, exactly. And if they feel those emotions or feel those feelings strongly enough, then the character can kind of take those feelings on themselves and eventually get to the point where they can control those feelings and use it to see why people are feeling the way they're feeling.
Oh, okay, I get you. Yeah.
But in the early stages, it is a little bit like, hang on a second, like, like in the first Life is Strange, I was rewinding time and seeing how things play out differently. Now it's just like, oh my god, that crying lady's sad. I should talk to her.
I can feel her blues. I want to feel her blues and find out why she's blue.
Oh, yeah. You feel some blues, all right.
But I can imagine. I bet.
Yeah. Anyway, Life is Strange, True Colors. It's like a 7 out of 10. In video game media terms, it's like a 7 out of 10.
Ah, right. Did you see what I said?
It's a 7 out of 10. I read that conversation on Discord, so I was like, wanted to clarify. That's an IGN 7 out of 10.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. So should we? Okay. Right. What should we do first? Matrix or Metroid Dread?
I don't know, because we're going to be here all night. No, we won't. Actually, I take that back. I don't want to put anyone off.
We've just talked about a game. We did a movie, then a game, then a game. Let's do a movie, and then we'll come back to the game.
So, you start us off this time, because I've spoken for about 3 hours.
The Matrix Resurrections, of course, came out 22nd of December. I can't remember when I went to see it, just before Christmas. This is an interesting one because I have a thing that if a lot of people are saying something is bad, and okay, this isn't the thing that you and Chris accuse me of, whereby if some people say something's bad, I say it's good just to be difficult. But I do find that my expectations are affected by if people say something's really bad and then I go and see it and it's not as bad as I was thinking they meant it was. It makes me enjoy it more because my expectations are lower.
Okay.
And if someone says something's really good, and then I see it and I don't think it's that good, I kind of get annoyed because I was led to believe it was fantastic, and then I see it and I was like, can't believe I was lied to, and then I feel like it ruins my enjoyment of that thing a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know how much of that happened to me in The Matrix, but I was going to say I thoroughly enjoyed The Matrix. I think I will stick with that. I thought it was it's an interesting one because I think in the same way that Metroid fans, and I won't sort of spoil it by talking about it too much now, in the same way that I think Metroid fans have said a lot of good things about Metroid Dread because I think in part it's a Metroid game. I think that having seen the Matrix films, my whole life and growing up with them and really being into it at the time, this for me was a really nice cap on the Matrix trilogy because I really enjoyed the first film. I thought the second film was pretty good, but was a little bit let down with it. I didn't really like the third one, and there's a whole scenes in the third one that I just kind of really didn't like. Even in the second one, I thought there was some stuff that kind of really put me off. This film, it felt like they did some really cool self-referential stuff. They almost, which is super interesting. You can see where all the conspiracy theories came out about what was going on in this movie. Because it's kind of like everyone was right. I'm not going to ruin it.
We were right in the wrong way.
Yes, yeah. Like I'm not going to spoil the film for people here, but a lot of those conspiracy theories weren't wrong. They weren't right, but they were interestingly kind of wrong and right. But yeah, the fact that it can sort of look back at the original movie, like the first one, which is something I enjoyed as well. They didn't like delve too much into the second and third films. I felt there was more like. It felt like that when they did, but felt like when they sort of really looked back and showed scenes of and stuff, a lot of it was from the first film, which I appreciated. Or they had little like shoutbacks. That having been said, and me liking it, there were some things that I did think were kind of odd and didn't really hit with me, like the whole Agent Smith thing was Morpheus Agent Smith thing was kind of weird. So not okay. I don't try not to ruin it.
Yeah, no, it's difficult.
Yeah, the Morpheus character who's not Morpheus, but is Morpheus. I kind of felt that was really odd, and how that kind of is linked to the Agent Smith thing was weird. I also didn't like the fact that when looking back on it, I can't pick out scenes that I'm like, oh my god, that was amazing.
No, totally. Yeah.
And I want to say that they, even in the film itself, they talk about the fact of what is the Matrix to people, and they reference, is it an action? Is it philosophy? Is it this? Is it that? Which I thought was really interesting because there were all those discussions at the time. And coming out of this film, I was like, what did I want from it? Did I want another Matrix where it was all action and exciting and kind of like kicking people's asses and stuff? Did I want all the philosophy? And I definitely came down on the side that I was happy with what they did, and I liked the fact that they made a movie which I enjoyed and I thought was a good finish to a quadrilogy, because I didn't like where the third one ended.
Specifically where it ended?
That like, stream of consciousness aside,
okay.
What are your thoughts? Specific. Sorry, no, like I did. It felt like another cliffhanger.
I see. Well, yeah. I mean,
with some kind of putting a.
There's okay. Well, yeah. We can't. We need. I can't say anything. But yeah, I'm just getting questions that I have to ask you when we're done recording now.
Fair enough.
I don't really disagree with you though. I think you and I are kind of aligned. It's a weird one where I know this has only had a couple of weeks to breathe, whereas the thing I'm about to reference has had now over a year to breathe, over 2, in fact. But I feel like The Matrix Resurrections is kind of becoming my movie Death Stranding, where in the run-up
right.
to it, I was eating up all the trailers and all the information because I went into it knowing because of what it is and who's involved, I just don't care. And I can remember when you, me, and Chris were having an argument about John Wick 4 versus The Matrix 4. I said to you guys, the worst Matrix film ever made, like a Matrix film that gets a 15 on Metacritic, is more interesting to me than any John Wick film because it's a Matrix film. And that's the same with Kojima. If Kojima makes the worst game of all time, like I'm buying it day one.
Yep.
Because that's fascinating. And the reverse, it also like flipped in some respects because with Death Stranding, Kojima's bullshit weighed it down in a lot of ways. Like the moment to moment writing of some of the character stuff wasn't good, and then when his bullshit sort of like gave way to a pretty interesting open world game, I liked it. The Matrix is kind of the reverse, which is I liked their metatextual, like self-referential, nostalgic, stuff a lot. And then when it gave way to a film that had to be a film, I was like, oh, like, did we really just have to, like, we just had like fun for 45 minutes. Did we really just have to put like a finish line on this film and start hurtling towards it just for the sake of this being a movie? Even the finish line they create doesn't necessarily make sense to me, even like as I reflect on it. Like, but for 45 minutes, I was like, this is incredible. Because I didn't think they'd do that, and I didn't think they'd do it the way they do it. And at times, even there are lines of dialogue, like one I specifically remember, that are so explicit that I was like, how the fuck did they get away with this? Like, I'll say it for what it is. There's a specific line that mentions the company Warner Brothers in a completely different context, and I was like, what are they doing? Like, what is going on? And then
I loved all of that. And then it makes you think, how, like, is that true? Like, when the stuff they say, and
if that's true, that makes it even more fascinating. Like,
but almost, given the press that's come out since the movie dropped, means that the film could be even more genius than, like, even more. It could be genius if. Do you see what I mean?
We'll have to. Let's put it this way: it would be very interesting to see what Lana Wachowski or the Wachowskis do next, and who it's with, and how much money they get given to do it.
No, it's not a spoiler, so I'll sort of say what I think. I'll kind of give a little bit more context to that for people who haven't seen it, but I really don't want to like ruin it for people who want to see it. So I'm going to be careful with what I say. There is, as Jamie said, there is a line when they're talking about Warner Brothers, and they effectively talk about the fact that a company are making somebody do a sequel to something that they don't want to do, and that they kind of don't have a choice to do it or not, and that they feel like they have to, so they agree to do it. Which is super interesting in a film coming 20 years or 25 years after the original, and obviously you're watching a sequel to a trilogy, and you're like, hold on, if you're saying you don't want to do this, but you're being made to do it, talking about the Matrix Resurrections, now, not the in-game thing, the in-movie thing, then the news that's been released since saying that the Matrix Resurrections is a flop and that they've effectively cancelled any sequels that were in the works for further Matrix films, if part of the point was because Lana didn't want, or the Wachowskis in general didn't want to make any more of them, and they have crafted a situation whereby they can make a film which would appeal to diehard fans, like myself, but would mean that they didn't have to make any more, would be like, I'm giving them far too much credit, I'm sure, but that would be pretty incredible if that was something they managed to pull off.
I mean, there's a lot of ways that stuff can be interpreted, but the fact that it exists in the form it does is, like I said, it's fascinating. I even think that some of the early integrations of more, okay, this is them progressing the Matrix formula and not like putting philosophy to one side. This is the Matrix lore being now expanded. I was interested in that because I'm interested in Matrix lore. But I felt like some of the locations they went, some of the characters that return, I felt like there's one character who returns essentially just to make a joke. Like, they are a major character that returns for one scene, and their return amounts to a punchline that they make at the end, which in itself is a weird like meta reference to everything else that's going on in this film. Very odd. And some of that stuff kind of lost me. I also just thought that like there were certain characters that I can't tell if I thought that they were mischaracterized or miscast. Right. There's a fine line. There's one character in particular who I was like, I understand the need for this presence. I don't understand the need for. I don't necessarily understand this casting or this kind of like this direction that they've taken it, and that meant that as it hurtled towards again what felt like a frustratingly formulaic final third relative to the first third, some of that stuff started to fall apart for me. But I'm glad it exists.
I am as well. I'm glad it exists as well. There was. I got strange vibes of like a Free Guy, Ready Player One, and another movie that I can't think now the names of. I had weird vibes of those as well, and I did think that maybe since The Matrix, all the other films that have come out that have kind of touched on similar things, similar themes, may have almost, like, you know, it's hard to then watch a fourth Matrix movie and go, oh, this is kind of referencing some of this, or it's copying this a little bit, and then you have to think, well, no, it isn't. It's actually copying itself. It's just that those other films have used elements of it, and they're newer, so they're more fresh in your mind. So it kind of makes you think it's less original than it really is. And but, yeah.
You also get from that, and again, I think we could talk about this because we had these conversations prior to the release of the Matrix Resurrections. Like, what is a film or a story about the reveal of the fact that we are actually living in some kind of a virtual world or some kind of simulation in the context of the Matrix, in a world where the Matrix exists? And it's like we joked before, many months ago now, that if someone came and to one of us and said, oh my god, we're actually all living in a simulation and machines keep us in pods and use us like batteries, we'd all go like, what, like the Matrix? Like, the most genius thing the creators of the Matrix could ever do is create a world in which the Matrix exists, and you get into these weird meta layers of that stuff, and yeah, like, I think that's, yeah, like, compared to like a Free Guy, like, it's almost like a zombie, like the zombie film issue, which is that the first thing that everyone does in a zombie film nowadays is they go, oh my god, like, what's going on? When the reality is, like, the second a zombie outbreak started happening, we all go, oh, there's zombies. Like, you destroy their brains, true. Or they're going to eat us. It's a zombie. Yeah. So, like, there's an element of, like films or media that touches on simulations when we all have seen things like The Matrix that we're like, oh yeah, it's a simulation. Like, you know, you might be wired in somewhere else, or you can bend or break the rules because, you know, the Matrix kind of taught. So to then have the Matrix be able to do its own meta stuff with things that it established, I don't know. That's why it's more interesting to me than, say, like a Free Guy.
You've just reminded me of a zombie film that kind of does the same thing the Matrix Resurrections does, and I can't now remember the name of it.
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure there are some where they're like, it happens, they're like, oh, zombies, I've seen it. Yeah, like, we've been making movies about these things for years.
Oh, but it does that, but it also does the thing of talking about the script of the movie in the film.
Oh, wow. I remember one film that did that was...
Bill Murray, Adam Driver, Tilda Swinton.
Oh, that's... not Only Lovers. Jim Jarmusch film. It's a Jim Jarmusch film.
It's really good.
It was not Only Lovers Left Alive, is it?
Something like that. No, it's not that. It's the name of a song, because it's the name of the song is the title of the movie, and in the film they go, oh, you've heard it before because it's the title track to the film. And it's like, what did they just say?
The Dead Don't Die.
Dead Don't Die. Yeah,
and it is a Jim Jarmusch film.
I really enjoyed The Dead Don't Die. It was one of those I didn't think I was going to. I thought it was going to be too weird, and the cast is incredible. So
I'm looking at this cast now, and I'm like, my eyes are watering. Like, what the fuck?
The cast is. I mean, if you haven't seen it, dude, you need to see it. It's incredible. But it has like self-referential stuff. I swear that if I remember rightly, it says like, oh, well, they're zombies, and people know what a zombie is. It's a weird film, but it's a film I thoroughly recommend to people who like, you know, that kind of weird weird sort of movie. I think you'd love it. I think you'd really.
Okay, it's the Matrix Resurrections of zombie films, says Alex Jones.
But then it was interesting for me because I went to see the Resurrections with my wife, who doesn't remember the original trilogy that well.
Okay.
And was never that as into it as I was. And she did not have as good a time because she was like, who was that person? Why were they doing that? I don't remember this person from whatever.
Oh, yeah.
What was this whole scene about? And I was like, yeah. If you're not like into the Matrix, then you're going to kind of think that.
I think that I identify someone who's into the Matrix, and I think that like if you and I like both sat down like after this recording, now 2 weeks removed from having seen the film, and broke down how we remember. You've already mentioned it, like the character who is essentially the new Morpheus, like who or what he is. Like I remember what the film says, but it's strange.
Yes, yeah. I know.
Even Jonathan Groff's character, let's say, in this film,
right? Like
it's strange, and there are parts of it that I get, and there are parts of it that I probably need to watch a video about or read the Wikipedia.
Do you know what? It's one that I would love to see the director's commentary on, like
sure,
on a DVD, something like that. Would be great.
Sure.
I do have to because one thing I didn't understand, and I haven't really seen it that many places, and I'm assuming that it's just that my good old friend Jeremy from the Court Ring just loves to put this in the titles of his videos.
Oh God!
I know everyone hates the fact that I still watch the Court Ring, but I do. What can I say? So he did a video where he basically says the Matrix Resurrections flopped because it was a woke disaster.
Oh, because it went rogue, and so subsequently it went broke.
Exactly. It went woke. It got broke. But then as I watched it, and after I watched it, I was genuinely like, I don't see how you can say this has gotten woke. Like what elements of it are woke?
No, I agree. Like, there's nothing. Okay,
there's nothing that jumps out at me. It's like, oh, this is.
Well, again, like I have an idea, but I definitely cannot bring it up because it's one of the biggest spoilers of the entire film.
The one thing I think you're referencing, but I wouldn't even say that. I wouldn't even.
I don't think that counts as going woke.
No, I don't either.
I think they take the piss out of themselves somewhat in the first third of the film, where, put it this way, like one of the things that the Wachowskis have got attention for over the last handful of years is lots of people have come up with different ways of interpreting the Matrix and what it might be an allegory for, and popularly it was an allegory for like religion and the idea of like a prophecy foretelling the return of the one, and a ship called the Nebuchadnezzar, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that happened a couple of years ago was the Wachowskis, who have both undergone who are both transsexual and both now women. They came out and said, actually, like a lot of the Matrix is an allegory for that kind of change and the journey of self-identification and finding out who you really are and your purpose on the purpose of you and your life on this planet. And some people were like, well, this seems like you've gone on a journey of change and like gone back to the Matrix and you've gone in reverse order. Like exactly, retrospectively. That's the word I'm looking for. But there's a scene, again, not spoiling anything, but there's a scene in the first third where like there's like a lot of different characters who are there almost for comedic effect, and they're all kind of like reminiscing about something that they're talking within the Matrix about something else, the way we would talk about the film The Matrix, and they're all talking about what it means to different people, and they joke about the same things that we joke about in real life, like, oh, it's actually all about religion, and then someone else will go, oh no, it's actually all about self-discovery and identity, and then someone else will go, oh no, it's actually all about the action scenes. Yes. And, like, they're playing it for laughs, but going back to the original point, I thought it felt like there's a self-awareness to the potential woke elements of The Matrix.
Yes. No,
I apologise. I butchered that sentence because I did all that preamble, and I was like, I can't say any of the words I meant to say here because they're all spoilers.
Yeah, but I think if out there, if you haven't seen it and you have any interest at all, I'd say see it. Don't maybe go in thinking it's going to be another Matrix, like it's all about kicking people and shooting stuff and guns and all of that. It's definitely, I'd say maybe even rewatch the original trilogy is not probably a bad shout before you go into this. But going from one sort of series that has come back to life and has had a new one come out in the franchise, let's move on to another one because we have both played Metroid Dread since the last podcast as well. And for me, I don't know about you, this was my first Metroid game. I've never actually played a Metroid game before. I've played Metroidvanias like to some degree. Like it's never been a series style that I've been massively into. But like I'm sure a lot of Nintendo Switch fans out there, I was sort of hungry for more Switch-based content, and so this seemed like a good game to pick up on the Switch.
Yeah, I wanted it for the same reason.
So, what did have you played a Metroid game before? Are you into Metroid in general?
So I have only ever played the Metroid Prime games before, which take a lot of that Metroid DNA and some of the kind of the principles of Metroidvania game design, but obviously apply them to a first-person shooter framework. And I played the first two of those, the Metroid Prime and Echoes.
And with this, I will say, with Metroid, the one big thing I really want to talk to you about with this, and I even put a poll on my Twitter about this, is because one of the things that happened to me with Metroid was I read a load of amazing reviews before I went into this, and I saw a ton of incredible reviews, from different game journalists and outlets who were sort of saying it's a 9 out of 10, it's incredible, it takes the Metroid formula and it brings it up to date in an incredible way, blah 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 blah. So I was really excited to play a game that got that well reviewed, especially my first sort of dip into that franchise. Like I said, never played any Metroid games before, and I wasn't let down in the sense of I had fun, I enjoyed the game, I finished it in. It was only I think it took me 10 hours to complete, but I did it in like a week, so it's obviously something that I wanted to sit down and play. And it's got a cool loop. It's a great Switch game. Like I think it is a very good Switch game.
Agreed.
But when it comes down to that, like the way people talked about the game, the way people reviewed it, it does kind of baffle me a little bit, because I can't in my mind put together a 9 out of 10 like amazing visuals, great story, great mechanics, brilliant gameplay, amazing level design, which are all the things that I've seen people talk about, and put all that together and go, oh, so it's a 9 out of 10, it's a 10 out of 10, it's a 5 out of 5. Like that to me is surprising, to say the least. It was good in that I felt like I was playing like an old school game that had been brought into the modern day with fancy visuals, and more, maybe more thought into things like. So there's some cool elements like the cutscenes that are like almost interactive, which I haven't really seen that in a game before, where it doesn't explicitly tell you, oh, you can interact in this cutscene, or you can like keep shooting, or you can do whatever. And it kind of took me by surprise at first, but I thought it was quite good. It's pretty seamless as well, woven into the game.
Yes, yeah. Some cool like action shots as well, like where Samus will just pose for the camera as something cool goes on around her.
Yeah, but I don't know. But all in all, like, what did you think? What are you thinking about the game?
I mean, so I'm only about halfway through, but your thoughts and my thoughts are kind of aligning. I never thought I'd say this, but I remember in the past you've been accused of having this sort of almost anti-Nintendo agenda.
I have.
And I think the people that have accused you of having one, it's been because, like, let's say a Super Mario game will come out, and it will be very good, and it'll be very tight, and it'll be very polished, play very well, and be a lot of fun. And you'll say something.
It's a fun, dinky little game.
Yeah, and you'll say something to the tune of, but if you changed the word Mario to Bob, and this was Super Bob Odyssey, and it had no connections to Nintendo or any of people's nostalgia buttons, I don't think they'd give this a 9.8 out of 10. They'd give it like an 8, and they'd call it very good because that's what it is. And I never really agreed with you because I always put my nostalgia goggles on, and I love having my nostalgia goggles on. I love overrating Mario games. I do it. Did it professionally for many years. But I don't have nostalgia goggles for Metroid, and so yeah, like there are people who have come out and given this a 10 out of 10 or close to perfect scores and Game of the Year awards, and Like I listened to a podcast in the last couple of days of someone who was adamant that it was a near perfect game for them in terms of what they want, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't align with what I feel about Metroid Dread. I just think it's very good. I think it's good because it's, again, like for all the reasons you kind of usually go to Nintendo, because it's tight and it's fluid and it's cohesive, and you can tell that it's made by people who have a very strong understanding of the fundamentals of game design in terms of like the rollout, whether it's the rollout of new weapons and new items, or whether it's like map layout, or like the kind of the breadcrumb trail that leads you from one place to another. I know you got lost at one point, but like I, for whatever reason, didn't get lost at that same point. Like it felt, I have problems with it, but they're problems that are more with the game butting up against what I want from this game, not what it is. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I completely understand. I think I know I got lost twice actually. But I think the part of the problem with that is one of the first times was quite early on when I'd got to a new area. So basically you take shuttles or lifts in the game, and it will take you from one little small mapped area, which is feels kind of open. It'll take you to another area, like might be above you or to the side of you, whatever. And I got to a new area, and I think I moved through a couple of rooms, and then effectively got to a dead end and couldn't go anywhere, and was like,
okay,
like, oh, what am I supposed to do? So then kind of backtracked, went back and thought, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to go in the lift yet. Maybe that I go back and I'll get some other items and things.
Yes.
But it was wrong. So basically, I just needed to shoot a block with a rocket, and it would have revealed that actually that block meant that you could have broken that block. And then that was the first time. And I actually looked up online. I was like, am I being really dumb? Like, where'd you go? And it sort of said, oh, yeah, it's because you need to, where these breakable blocks are that you can't break because you don't have the right weapon, next to them a few blocks over, there's another bit where you can break them, and then you can get through and you can progress. And I kind of thought, oh, right, so this isn't an open world, a hub world game where you're supposed to kind of explore one area until you've exhausted that area and then move on, blah, blah, blah. You effectively follow a linear path through the game in kind of hub world sections, but it's still pretty linear. And then the game directs you, like you said, with breadcrumbs. You flow through the game in a linear fashion, but you kind of go, the thing that kind of took me by surprise, and maybe it's because I haven't, like I said, played many of these games before, the game will take you from one area to another area. You'll linearly move through that area, get to doors that you can't progress through, but then find a route back to the like the where you originally came from, and then go through like almost like overlapping paths to reach another area or a power up or a new weapon, which will then lead you to another lift or a shuttle that will take you to another area, and then you can then open doors that you couldn't previously open.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of backtracking element and going, multiple teleports or transports or whatever to get to different areas and different maps that you'd already been to, that kind of threw me a little bit. And I thought, am I supposed to be playing this like a hub world game where when I get the next power up, I go back and I go all the way back to the first area, first hub, and I do all the bits that I couldn't do with the new weapon. And one of the things for me was I found myself thinking, I can't be bothered. Like, it's going to take me too long. It changes toward the end of the game, because in the end of the game you can kind of move much more freely, obviously, through the entire map. But
right, because there's teleporters as well as elevators, and
there are teleporters, elevators, and like little shuttle things. But then what I mean is, once you've got all of your power-ups, you can destroy any blocks you want, and you can kind of move much more freely across entire levels. Whereas toward the beginning of the game, you can't do that. You would have to have followed the linear path all the way back to get to a certain area, to use a weapon, to get through a gate. And I'm like, I can't be bothered with that. And then I'd have to go to a shuttle to go back to a teleporter to go. And it almost made me think, with most hub worlds, open world games, I want to go and explore those areas. I want to go and look around. And I didn't get that with this as much. I wanted to finish the game. I was like, let me just keep going. Let me keep plugging away until I can get to the end.
I felt like the game didn't want me to. And I know it's weird to kind of simultaneously praise a game for the breadcrumb trail and the sort of like the very subtle linearity of its design in the face of an otherwise open-looking environment. But there were times where, I got a new ability and I was like, oh my god, I can think of like 20 times I haven't been able to do X. Yes. And now I've got a thing that lets me do X. And it's like, oh, no, you can't go backwards. We're not letting you go back there to all the things you went
Right.
past. You have to keep going forward to this elevator off to another. Like, you're going to get back there eventually. Like, you have to trust us that we're going to lead you back through all the areas you want to go through, but you're not backtracking on your own behest at this point. Like, I'm sorry, we're not going to let you. And that felt counterintuitive. I think the comment I made to both you and Chris was I realised at points, and this was exacerbated further by two of the things we haven't spoken about yet, two of the game design choices that we haven't spoken about yet, that I was playing a Metroidvania-style game that wasn't necessarily for people who haven't played very, very many Metroidvania-style games. And I realised that I actually wanted something like... I thought back to a game called Shadow Complex that came out in the 360, got over a decade ago now, and I was like, oh, I actually just want like a series of interconnected rooms where I'm like just going through and exploring, and then I'm getting a ability and I'm going somewhere else, I'm getting ability. I wanted something that was like simpler than Metroid Dread is,
Right.
because and maybe I'm not the right, wasn't the right point for Metroid. I've never played a 2D Metroid game before. Never played Super Metroid. I didn't play that 3DS one. Didn't play any of the regular DS ones like Fusion or other. Didn't play anything. And so there was a point, some elements of Dread that I was like, oh, maybe this game wasn't actually meant for me. It's not that I'm not enjoying it, but like, I can see why hardcore Metroid heads are like, this is the Metroid game I always wanted.
Yes. Yeah.
And those other two
I had
elements,
the same feeling, yeah.
those other two elements, I know one of them you ended up being very positive on. One of them was Emmys, which featured very heavily in the promotional stuff.
The Emmy thing, I was like you, I did not like at first, because I found like they were a pain in the arse. You get a weird ability to kill them, but you use it once and then you lose it, and it builds into a thing where you have to find a core room in order to defeat the core to get the power to take out the Emmy. And I died. The Emmys killed me, like each one probably killed me like 3 or 4 times before I took it more slowly, used my phantom cloak, snuck about, and did whatever. Yeah. But actually, toward the last of the Emmys that I took out, I had the only-ish times in the whole game probably that I actually had moments where I was like, damn, that was close, like that was tense, and actually was pretty cool, which is where you're blasting the Emmy in the face, its little heat shield explodes, and then it stands up, and then you've got to like charge up your superpower, and it's like walking towards you, and the game sort of goes into slow motion. And a couple of times I literally blasted them in the face when they were maybe like half a second from killing me. And those moments that I was like, damn, like that was so intense. Like I thought it was going to rip my face off. Because for people who don't know, like when you play the Emmy sections, if they catch you, they will kill you, but you have 2 chances to counter. But it's damn near impossible. I think I managed it 4 times in the entire game.
Yeah, I've done it. I think I've done it 3 times.
It was rough. Like if you're not on point with your countering, then
yeah.
But the other thing that kind of that struck me, and maybe this is unfair, and I'm never that good at following stories in games. I'm much more of like, get me to the next bit, get me to the next bit. But the story felt so tacked on, like
bizarre.
It's the way that it sets it. You crash into a planet, or you go to a planet because you're like, oh, there are X on this planet. We thought we've had an image of an X on this planet, which is this weird little blob thing that can take over living things, and effectively can take over, destroy entire ecosystems. So Samus goes to the planet to take it out. You arrive on this planet, you get knocked unconscious, and you wake up in the depths of the planet, right? And then you've got to work your way out. So that to me kind of makes sense. It's like, right, so the story is the X are here somewhere possibly, and I've got to work my way up, and you've got the little computer buddies telling you all the way along, like, Samus, all your powers have disappeared. You've got to go and reclaim all your powers and get to the surface to your ship. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like, I totally get all that. But then it randomly just seeds in these bosses that it doesn't, the bosses effectively are just local fauna. Effectively. They're not X. They're not like enemies. They're just animals that happen to be kicking it about that you get to fight. And they're the bosses for like 60% of the game.
True.
They then see
with other weird hooks though, because then there's one boss that is essentially just fauna, but then it's kind of implied that you fight them again after their body's been like recouped and they've been like rebuilt. So it's like, who's rebuilt? Like the planet's alive? What, like?
Oh, but this is. I'm trying to think which one you mean. This is when the X rebuild them, the little jelly blob things. Because they like take them over and then they come back and then they build them again and they rebuild themselves. Do you mean those dudes?
Sorry, go for it.
I was going to say, so then I was like, okay, then you have to fight the X as well, and I'm like, that makes more sense because the X are here, they're taking over the little creatures, and you've got to blast the X. But then they've already been blasting the alien, the fauna anyway, who just happen to live on the planet.
Yeah.
There are random huge boss monsters that are just chained up in rooms for no apparent reason. And
Yes.
I'm like, why are they here? And then you have the people who live on the planet as well, who the tribe, I can't remember what they're called.
But do they
fighting
live on the planet? Because again, like a lot of this, if we sound confused, a lot of this is delivered in bizarre exposition dumps that happen like once an hour. From characters that you've never met before. Largely, do you remember when I criticised Doom Eternal for being large dumps of exposition that was mostly populated by proper nouns that you've never heard before?
Right,
Metroid Dread has the same problem. And it's like, hang on a second, I've never seen this bird before, but they're going to talk at me for 3 minutes about everything that's going on, and I've never heard, I don't know the race, I don't know these people, I don't even really know what a Metroid is, beyond that it's a weird floating brain-looking motherfucker.
I was exactly the same. I'm like, I don't know what a Metroid is. I don't know what an X is. I was like, am I a Metroid? And I was like, okay, no. You have DNA.
You have Metroid DNA because of the things that happen in Metroid Fusion, I think.
Which mean that the X can't infect you, so that's why you're the only one who can stop the X, because you have.
But then like now there's no Metroids left, and there are people that want the Metroid DNA. So there's a character who's coming to get the Metroid DNA from you, and there are other characters that know that character that are trying to stop him. They're trying to protect you. It
is weird. The story is non-existent, and it feels like it's all tacked on to give you a reason to go from the bottom of the map through the other maps to your ship. That's like literally the whole story is there for that. And then it feels like they've gone, right, it's Metroid. We need boss fights. So then they've seeded in these fauna from the planet form the boss fights. And you're like, okay, weird. Don't know why I'm fighting these giant monsters. Don't know why they're chained up in a room that obviously the other little robot people have chained them up. But then it's always like, but why am I fighting the other robot people? Like, okay, so they must be working for this fella. So then he doesn't like me, so I'm fighting him. Okay. And it's this like again and again and again. And then you get the Emmy situation. And I reckon the Emmys only exist in that game to add an extra element to the gameplay, because otherwise, I think you touched on something when we were talking about this before, which is the game takes a weird sort of diversion where you're playing through these the levels, the maps, and it's almost, I suppose they're almost like dungeons, right? You're playing through your dungeon, you're taking out all the enemies. There's no challenge at all. You die incredibly rarely to any of the environmental things, any of the local sort of animal things that are trying to mess you up. But then you go into an Emmy section, and the Emmys are like deadly. If you can't take them out, you have to just run from them. They're stealth sections, which you're kind of not expecting. And then even when you can take them out, they're pretty tense little fights.
Mm.
I think they were tacked on just to give the game something else, to just give it another element. It's what it really feels like, because they don't seem to offer any other purpose, to be honest.
It's plausible. I think all they really did for me is, like you said, they were just like a weird flow disruptor. And I just felt like the weird, sort of, I think the way I said it to you guys, with the weird peaks and troughs that the game's pacing goes through, just sometimes seem counterintuitive. Like, again, like, why are there so many enemies that I don't even, like, look at, or, like, from moment to moment, because they pose so little threat to me. If I'm then going to get into, like, go through a door where there's an enemy on the other side, or an Emmy on the other side that kills me 6 times, and then 10 minutes later there's a boss that kills me 15 times, and like, well, you might be asking, like, why is there a boss that kills me 15 times? Like, partly it's because I've probably fucking suck at the game, or the game doesn't help because I think its control layout isn't that great, and when you're playing on Joy-Cons, it's very difficult. When you have big fat fingers, and they don't even use like the R2 equivalent, ZR or whatever it's called, the fucking 50% of the game, and you're like the biggest button, the most accessible button in your entire fucking controller, you don't use it. You got me holding your R1 equivalent to do the most important thing in the game, like or your L1 rather. Well, L1 they're both fucking important. And then there's also like, you get the game like fucking gasses you up loads by giving you extra health. So you start off with one health tank, basically. Let's say it's got 100 hit points in it, and you'll find entire additional health tanks, so that even by the time you're at my point in the game, I've got like 500 hit points which like so 5 times what I started with. And it's like, well, hang on a second. There's no point in you giving me any of this if I'm fighting some stupid fat dude underwater who shoots out these blue bubbles, and if one of his tentacles touches me, I lose 70 hit points. If you scale the damage the bosses do with the amount of health you're giving me, you're not giving me more health.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a little rant.
I think by the time I got to the end of the game, I think I got 50% of the items in the game, and I think I had I want to say I had like 15 of those little health blocks, and it couldn't be that many. Maybe it's like 10, but I had a lot of health. But it took me most of the bosses in the game, I'd say, were actually not that, like, they weren't too bad. Like
I'm struggling, bro.
By the time I got into the flow of how they work, I was okay. It was like the first sort of time you come into contact with a certain type of boss, you're kind of in trouble. But then after you kind of get it, you can. And there are 2 bosses that took me. One of them took me like 10 to 15 goes, which was the big, like, mutated X thing, which is the
guy that's chained up and shoots like lasers down. The guy that's chained up above you, not the guy that's chained up to the side of you.
Yes, yeah, the guy's chained up above,
and he's like Experiment X something or other.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So he took me a decent, because part of the problem with that was the double jump is infuriating because it's a timed jump that if you double tap it, it doesn't double jump. You have to tap it and then wait and then tap it, but it also only works if you're already spinning. So if you jump up directly, you can't just tap it again. You have to be jumping to the side. And there's a section where you have to be running, and then he fires like lasers across the screen at you, and you have to jump. Then you have to jump. Then you have to like double jump.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I would just hit the timing on the double jump, and I'd get hit by a laser and get pushed back into the wall, and I'd lose all my health and I'd be dead. And I was like, this game is trash.
I'm never finishing that final boss, I can tell.
The final boss was annoying because I got to a point where he wasn't doing any damage to me. Or the damage he was doing, I would recoup in health that I would get from him by doing damage to him. But the problem was I didn't realize that you have to do a counter to him. It's not like, so in the other bosses, there's kind of a whole bit where, and to be fair, he's similar, but they'll fight you, and then they'll go into a big move where it almost feels like a cutscene. And then there's an indicator to do a counter. And if you do the counter, you go into an extended bit of the cutscene and you kind of move into the next phase of the boss fight. He doesn't really have that. The final boss basically fights you, and then he'll stop and do this. Go, ha, 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 and wave at you.
Right.
And at that point, if you run at him and hit counter, you can enter into a little cutscene and you can move on. And if you shoot him loads, you can move into the next phase. I didn't realize that. So I would counter him. And often, if you're not still running when you counter, you just don't engage with him, and guys just start fighting again. I fought him for like 15 minutes, and I was just shooting him, and I wasn't dying, and he was just shooting me, and he did this a few times, and I was like, "What the hell, man? I'm running at you, hitting counter, nothing's happening," and then we just carry on again.
I did the same thing. You know, there's an underwater boss, and it basically it mostly resolves to like shooting this ball sack that he's got like above his head and avoiding these blue bubbles that he shoots out.
Right.
I didn't realise that you have to shoot the button next to you to lower the water enough that you move quickly on the mag lift from one side of the boss to the other. So I did that, just like I'm going to shoot out my bubbles and occasionally whip you face, like half an hour just without dying. And I was like, every time the lift appears, I fucking lasso up to the lift and I don't move across in time. Like, what am I meant to...
I think you're absolutely right when you say if you're not someone who plays that sort of game, there's stuff you just don't realize.
Oh, you know, there's a character in a thing you fight in the game. It's more of a mini boss than an actual boss. It's like one of the first when you fight one of like the soldiers from that tribe.
Yeah.
And they have an attack where like it's a big slash attack that kind of glows red, and it's like, hey, get out of the way of this. And one of the ways that like you're meant to get out of the way of it is jump or like ball jump or whatever, and then you can do this kind of like dash kind of, and you can do it in the air, and you can spam like 2 or 3 of them in like one thing, even though it uses all your energy at once. And I found it so hard just to jump over this guy, and this is a character that I already know from research that I have to fight 2 of simultaneously later on, and this one guy killed me about 15 times, and he's a mini boss.
So the weird thing about this is, and this is one thing I actually looked up, and I found a few people having this discussion, and I don't know if it's true or not, about adaptive difficulty, because I definitely felt in this that I would fight one boss a few times and be like, "There's no way I'm going to defeat this guy," and then on like maybe the fifth attempt, sixth attempt, I would just beat him.
Interesting.
And I was like, hold on. I was like, I haven't suddenly gotten a shitload better. Like, has the game artificially made this easier, or do they not use certain moves that they're like, oh, you're dying a lot to this move, so they're going to tweak it? I didn't feel it with some bosses. I didn't feel it with all of them. Some of them, like, they were so predictable. I would say there was no adaptive difficulty in it at all, because like you can almost know what they're going to do next. But some of the, like you said, some of those are like the soldier bosses and things, and the little shield guys and that. I did kind of feel there was a bit of an adaptive difficulty thing going on, because I would fight a few times and then suddenly be like, oh, okay. As for the two ones, I'll say, don't worry about it. They are nowhere near as difficult later on when you've got more health than. And I took them both out. I think because you have to fight two of them twice.
Oh, great.
And
I know there's also like an advanced one with the shield.
There's more than one.
Okay, great.
And there's one with a shield that you can destroy the shield at least, and there's another one later on in the game where you can't destroy the shield, and he is well annoying when you first face him. Like he is he is damn tough.
Yeah.
But if there's no adaptive difficulty, then I will give the game a lot of credit for the fact that it must have just been how much I played it. That my ability got that much better, and my pattern recognition, even without me knowing, got that much better, that I was able to take out, like, by the time you get to the end point of the game, you're at a point where you can take out the final boss, and he's easily the hardest, I would say. Like, he's got so many moves, he's so many variations, and I think on my final go against him, it was, when you just feel like you're on a flow in a game, and you're like, I'm on point here. Like, he didn't touch me until the final phase, I think, and he only hit me like 2 or 3 times. So he was killing me every time, and suddenly I was sliding under him every time he tried to like slide across the screen and take me out. I dodged all of his stuff. I countered all of his things. I did it. I think I put him away in about 6 minutes or something, which was like the best I'd done, or the quickest I was on to get it done. And it definitely gave me that feeling of, you're getting better at this game. Like the bosses, those fights were cool. I just wish the whole thing had been packaged better with the story. I wish I hadn't have felt as kind of frustrated with the layout of the levels and the way that it made me feel like I don't really want to backtrack. Can I be bothered to backtrack? And I was running across one way to get a power, to run across another way to get a power, to, I just found some of that stuff a bit dull. And then I'll quickly wrap up because people are bored of this. They actually touched on a few things which I loved, which was they, rather than do now you've got this power, you can go and get through that door that you couldn't get through before, because when they've done that 10 times, it's kind of annoying. They then introduce a whole thing where like the actual environment changes, and they have different reasons for it changing. So the scenery will get damaged, and then you can like blow off bits of the scenery and you can progress like that, which is not something they'd done up to that point. There's a bit where part of level freezes and it wasn't frozen before, and it changes the layout of the level. And because there was water before that's now frozen, you can now run on top of it, and which means you can progress. And some of that stuff I really like. I thought this is how I would have preferred the rest of the most of the game to progress, with much more innovative ways of leading you through that environment. But I'm sure people are insanely bored of us talking about Metroid. But it must be good because we've talked about it.
Yeah, I've got good news for people, is that if they are bored of that conversation or any of the conversations we've had this week, just wait till Chris is back next week and is desperate to talk about The Matrix Resurrections and Metroid Dread. That's the SuperShow guarantee, is that if something's worth talking about, it's worth talking about 3 times.
What, twice?
No, but there have been things in the past where it's like, oh, I played this game that you've both talked about.
Oh, right.
We need, but that's one of our bad habits. But there we go. I'm sure, Chris.
Man,
I'm sure it'll bring something new to the table.
At least we're not going to chat about Marvel Avengers for a lot this year.
True, actually. Well,
done and dusted, I think.
Yeah, I'm not even going to make a comment. Otherwise, it will count as a Marvel's Avengers discussion, and we'll have broken our oath.
Oh, right. Even Spider-Man couldn't save Marvel's Avengers. But of course, Jamie, Spider-Man with Marvel's Avengers was exclusive to the PlayStation. And do you know something else which is going to be exclusive to the PlayStation?
How have you fucking... Okay, I'll let you get away with it. Tell me.
It's the PlayStation VR2. because it has
Ooh.
formally been announced. Not announced, sorry, has been almost showed off. Showed off in silhouetted terms.
Well, not even we don't even know what it looks like. They just basically said, "Oh yeah, this is what it's called."
Well, they controllers they showed off, kind of. They had,
we've seen them.
We had some controllers shown off, some VR Sense controllers. So yeah, obviously we knew that the PlayStation VR or the Mark II of PlayStation VR was going to come out because it was announced last year. But the name for it has now been announced, and it is called PlayStation VR2. And the new controllers which are going to go with that are the PlayStation VR Sense controllers. I think I'm getting that right.
Yeah, Sense controller. What do you think of those names, by the way? PlayStation VR2 and the Sense controllers.
VR2, I mean, yeah, like it's just sticking a number. I don't mind. I don't like it these days when everything has to have a special name. Like rather than just go 2, 3, they have to like put some weird, or they just call it the PlayStation VR. That would have been bad. I'm fine with 2.
PlayStation VR Requiem.
Yeah, please no.
Maybe.
But Sense controllers, yeah, I think it makes sense because it's got the dual sense for the PlayStation 5, and they've got the Sense controllers for the VR. Yeah, why not? They are chatting some big numbers though, because VR2 boasts 4K HDR OLED panels with a 110-degree field of view roughly in each eye. So a very tasty offering.
Yes, I looked up the original PlayStation VR just for reference, because sometimes these numbers can all kind of blur together. And field of view, not that dissimilar. It's around 100 degrees, so only a slight improvement on field of view. But I will say that the resolution per eye on the PSVR 2 is basically double the original.
Right.
Which,
so I did say 4K per eye. I mean 4K. So per eye you get half the width of the 4K roughly, and you get the height. So it's 2000 by 2040 pixels per eye.
I think the original was like a 1080 panel, a 1920 by 1080 panel that was split, but then per eye kind of thing. So this is basically double the resolution per eye on a per eye basis.
Oh, no, this is more than that. Because if you have 1080 panels split, that would obviously be...
Let me find out. I was just looking at it. I probably said it wrong, though.
No, you're right, because it would be 1920 divided by 2 would be about 1,000 pixels wide per eye, and this is 2,000. You're right, it's twice. It's 2 times.
Yeah, basically, yes. It was like I've got the exact same thing here. The previous one was 960 by 1080 per eye. So this is basically double resolution per eye.
It's also, though, HDR, and it's also OLED, so... That's not just, a jump in resolution. That's also a jump in tech, which is going to make the colors more vivid. It's going to look nice and shiny all over. They've also talked about foveated rendering, which for those that don't know is where it renders the images that are directly in front of where you're looking in much higher quality and fidelity than it does other stuff, which allows them to render better pictures all over because they're not having to render the entire scene and then you kind of like just look around the entire scene. It renders much more high quality where you're looking. So you get like smoother action, better frame rate, much better picture per eye as well. They've also got eye tracking, which is they say is going to allow them to have eye control inside of games, which means that you can actually use where you're looking to convey, I suppose either actually control things in the game or to use eye line and things to convey emotions and things in game.
That's the thing. Like when I'm playing a VR game in multiplayer, if the people around me, if their pupils don't move in unison with their real world pupils, then my immersion's totally killed. Like I need to know not just the general direction you're looking at. I need to know what your eyeballs are looking at. And I'd want to say a big thank you to PSVR 2 for allowing my dream to come true.
The first thing I thought was people be able to see when I'm rolling my eyes at them. Like, oh.
That is true, actually.
Which is something you don't necessarily want.
It's only going to get creepier.
Yeah, absolutely. They've also got the way they're doing the motion tracking this time, if I understand it rightly, you have to correct me, Jamie, if I'm wrong, is that they have cameras in the controller, cameras in the headset, and the two work together to know where they are in reference to each other, which means that you don't need outside cameras. So you don't need a camera next to your on top of your TV or next to your PlayStation or anything, which sounds pretty cool.
I didn't mention it in the catch-up because I didn't have much to say that wasn't necessarily new in terms of a hot take, but my brother got an Oculus Quest 2 for Christmas. So I spent a couple of hours in VR over the Christmas period, and the Oculus Quest 2 is not only a completely wireless and self-contained device, but it also uses that quote-unquote inside-out tracking to do VR with no, light boxes or cameras or anything like that around the room. It just looks at the room and it's like, oh, that's where you are relative to everything else. So that's where you are in the game.
How did you find it?
It was the best VR experience I've ever had.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but you got to remember though that I've never had to go on a Valve Index. My VR experiences had been limited to, I think I spent a little bit of time in a PlayStation VR, a little bit of time in an HTC Vive, and a good chunk of time in an Oculus Rift. So most of my VR experience is grounded in 3 or 4 years ago. So to jump to a headset that, like I said, is completely self-contained, completely wireless, and has that tracking that means that you're just like a standalone VR experience. It was quite effective. And even so I played Superhot VR, I played the Oculus exclusive Star Wars story thing, Vader Immortal it's called, and I even played some Job Simulator, and I'll say that it ran smoothly. I didn't get any of the issues you might get from having everything sort of being processed and rendered within the headset itself. It was a very solid tracking experience, compared to the PlayStation VR, for example, night and day, no skipping, no weirdness, no nothing at all. Everything felt like it was flawlessly tracked. And even in terms of visual quality, no screen door effect, which I've definitely had before. So for me, it was kind of this simultaneous thing of jumping forward 3 or 4 years in terms of how long it's been since I've experienced VR tech firsthand, and also it's a complete standalone unit. I was just in the middle of I walked around in Job Simulator, and I've never done that before. I walked out of the cubicle and started walking halfway down the office because because it was in. My dad lives in the countryside, and obviously there's big empty spaces even inside the house. And so all you do is make a safe zone where it's there's a sofa here and the Christmas tree's there and there's a table here. And as long as not about to walk into something, nothing happens. You're not wired to anything. You just walk.
Which is quite funny because obviously when they made something a Job Simulator, they were assumed, oh, well, it's going to be limited by the valve was the biggest area that you could walk around in. Sorry, the valve was the biggest area you could walk around in, which was maximum 3 by 3 meters or something.
Right.
So they didn't assume that you could, but they probably, I suppose, didn't put any constraints on the fact that you could just walk around the whole office.
And I will say, it is surreal for the first time in my life in VR, walking, even if it's just 10 to 12 feet, walking and having that movement be represented 1-to-1 in VR. That's why it was the best VR experience I've had in my life so far.
I so want to have a go. I haven't had a go at the Quest 2 yet.
At the moment, £200 and a big room are that's your barrier to entry, which is a hell of a lot lower than it used to be.
I think is it not more than, is it £200? Is it not more than that?
It's probably more than that. I don't know.
I think it's a little bit more. Shall I have a look? Shall I look up?
I'm doing it as well. I think there's different sizes as well. But apparently it did well over the Christmas period, the Oculus Quest 2, and I'm kind of not surprised.
All right, so you can get a 128 gig version for £300.
300 quid, okay, yeah.
So, blimey, when you consider that you can either choose between getting an Oculus Quest 2 128 gig, or you can choose between getting a 2 terabyte expansion for your PlayStation 5, which is about 300 quid if you want to dip in and get one of those hardware.
Yeah, 300 quid's one of those weird price. It's the same with the Nintendo Switch. 300 quid's one of those weird price points where it's that opens up either a whole new avenue of entertainment, or it's something pretty mundane for. I mean, we need stuff like that for work. But again, yeah, I forget which headset you've got and when it came out, but I've got
the first Vive, yeah.
I was impressed with the Quest 2, and I can see why people are picking up. And again, it was the thing that I always wanted to. I remember when the Vive and the Rift were first coming out, and having that dream of what would my mum look like in VR? And I had that this year with my dad, because. And this sounds so stupid, but it was my brother would be finished with it. He'd put it down. He has one of these chargers where you just drop it in. When you wanted to play a game in VR, you walked up to this headset, You picked it up, you put it over your eyes, and you're in. There's no wires, there's no setup, there's no PC, there's no the launcher's built into the headset. Like everything's just there. Like the gap between you going from 0 to 100 is putting the headset on, and I think it made me realize how important that is to the future of VR. Which, bringing it back around to the news story, the fact that the PSVR2 apparently connects to the PS5 with one single cable. I believe it might even just be a single USB-C cable. Like, I think that's important for the PSVR2 as well. It's like ease of use and ease of setup.
I do. I still think that I'm a little bit not like annoyed. I don't know which word to use. I'm a little bit perturbed by the fact that it's still got a cable connected to it, because I would have hoped by now they would be able to make that wireless. I do think that's a big issue with headsets. Like I've got a one of the first Vive, and it's still annoying to have a wire coming out the back of your headset. And it would have been nice if PlayStation would have been able to sort that out. But the fact that it's only one cable, like you say, and if it's only one USB-C cable, and if you get a really long one, then that maybe that will be okay. But now that they're coming up against these, not even that expensive, 300 quid, right? If you're talking about getting a Quest 2, completely wireless, I do think it would have been nice to see it wireless. But we can't get everything with the next iteration, I suppose.
No. And it means the software battle gets to kind of continue on, because Facebook and Oculus are now investing in exclusives, continuing to invest in exclusives, and Resident Evil 4 VR was a big Quest 2 exclusive, and Sony, now the ball is in their court to say, okay, unlike Facebook, we actually own shitloads of developers, we even acquired some of our VR developers, can they make the software argument worth the while? Which they kind of did with PSVR, but not fully. No,
well, that's one good thing we got to sort of got. I can't even talk. We got a bit of a teaser on, is because they did announce that there is going to be a PlayStation VR2 specific game coming out for the PlayStation 5, which is Horizon Call of the Mountain, which I think is Guerilla Games and Fire Sprite. Thank you. Who've got together to make that. We didn't get to see much. We got a very brief little teaser of Aloy. It seems, I'm guessing Aloy, riding in a boat. As one of those huge mech dino things walks over the top of her, and I'm guessing that with the actually I don't know. Have they said whether the PlayStation VR is like a seated experience, VR2, or have they said whether it's something you can move around?
I don't believe they've said.
They have. Well,
the VR place. The first one was certainly something that was designed to be that for people who wanted it, right?
Right.
Like if you wanted to sit down, you could.
Yes, I think that seemed to be the main implementation for it. But the tiny bit of the trailer we got to see, it was like an on-rails thing where you were in a boat. I don't know if that'll continue through the whole thing or whether there will be sections you can move around in. But the idea of getting to explore the Horizon world in VR is something which is really exciting. I love the fact that they use that really tall like mech dino thing like miles above you, walking over you. Because I imagine to look up at that, see the trees and stuff is going to be pretty. So that is pretty wicked. That's something cool.
That is.
They showed up.
There were also rumours. I mean, and rumours are rumours, but they came up a couple of days ago that Sony I don't know if they're confident or if they were actively trying to ensure that Half-Life Alyx will see a release on the PlayStation VR2. And I've got to say, as someone who is still very jealous of anyone who got hands on, and probably like the single most enticing narrative experience that VR has produced yet. That is really exciting to me. And like the idea of like a PSVR2 Half-Life Alyx PS5 package, like I could see myself, as someone who doesn't own a VR headset, I could really see myself going for that.
No, you're right. I'm someone who should have played more of Half-Life Alyx and could play more of Half-Life Alyx. It's just, I don't know, I got a bit of like VR fatigue in the end, where it was the setup and getting everything ready. And like you said, I think the thing these days is if you can just put the headset on and use it, that'll be a game changer. Because getting like plugging in your lighthouses, getting all the cables out, making sure your handsets are like up to date and stuff is a bit of a ball ache when you have to do that every time.
Totally.
The sort of the first iteration. Unfortunately, we don't know quite when it's going to be out. The PlayStation VR2. I think. I'm trying to think if I've heard any rumors. I don't think there have been any rumors about it. Well, I think we can maybe given the fact they're talking about Horizon, we could guess that it's going to be out maybe toward the end of this year, maybe like holiday time.
I don't think that's an unfair guess. Like, I think if they announced it in February of last year, they said, hey, this is happening, and they've chosen January to come back and be like, this is it, and these are the final specs. Like, if you know your specs down to a T, then, like, I presume you've got some idea of, like, your path through to manufacturing.
Right.
And then, how manufacturing to shipping and so on. Like, it's not out of the question to connect those dots and end up with a 2022 release, in my opinion. I agree.
No, I think that would be quite a good sort of top release for them as well. You know what I mean? Because they don't want to wait. They don't want to wait too long that the tech starts to get like you start to talk about what's the Quest 3 look like, or whatever it's called, the new Meta headset that no doubt they'll release, which is gonna glue onto your face and you won't be able to take off.
That's the thing. The thing about the Quest is that Oculus and subsequently Facebook/Meta, like, they're in now. They were saying to my dad, like, they want a future, because my dad is obviously slightly older, but still, has a job and is in business and works with people who are a lot younger than him, and he does a lot of like startup stuff. And I was like, they want a future where when your co-workers want you to go to a meeting, they want you putting on one of those headsets like your kid and sitting at a virtual table next to your virtual co-workers in the metaverse with your little avatars waving at each other,
It's funny. I had this not argument. I had this discussion with my auntie like a few years ago, where I was about 5, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and I said that's the future of like business. It's going to be people in VR having meetings, and she like does a lot of meetings and stuff with people, and she was like, "That's rubbish. I don't want to do that. You can't. It's not the same as meeting face to face." And I was like, "It's the future. It's going to happen."
Yeah. And then mysteriously, a thing that's come, a mysterious virus arrives that stops us meeting. How convenient for Meta.
Yes, how convenient indeed. So PlayStation VR2 sounds like it is nearly finished, which is pretty cool. And something else which is nearly finished, apparently, is the Last of Us Remake, which should be releasing in 2022, if you believe industry insider Tom Henderson, and also some other sort of little leaks from VGC who have said that they've been told the same thing, which I think would be quite surprising. That would be pretty wicked, though. I'd be keen to play that remake as early as this year, which would be pretty awesome. Naughty Dog have led development since they wrapped production of Last of Us Part 2 to make the remake and get it out there, which you'd hope, wouldn't you? They're the ones making the remake.
Well, there was that other weird studio, like the PlayStation Arts and Motion Design. Like, there was a whole story that, because Jason Schreier was the one that outed that the fact that this existed last year, and it was during that big piece about all these different PlayStation first-party studios and how they were being put on different things, and people weren't happy, and so. But
didn't they pull the? I might be getting my wires crossed. Didn't they pull some of the Days Gone team to work on the Last of Us remake, which was because they were pissed off because obviously they wanted to make Days Gone 2. They were annoyed the fact that they didn't get to because
the Days Gone devs, Sony Bend, they were definitely involved in the story, and then there was this other team called like the Sony Arts and Moving Pictures Group. I can't remember. They had some silly name like that. And they were like an extra studio that like helped out with stuff and then wanted to make their own big thing. And I think they pitched a ground up big remake of Uncharted, and that got rejected. And then it got turned into a pitch for a remake of The Last of Us, which was greenlit, but then kind of like slowly taken off them. And people got moved on to different things. And people at Naughty Dog needed something to do because they were like, we shipped a game, but, Uncle Neil's going to take like another 18 months to get his next idea ready. So, yeah.
They needed that breathing space. So you actually get quite a chock year for Last of Us, because obviously we've got the remake, which is, like you're saying, apparently nearly done and should be coming out this year, 2022. You've also got the HBO series, is supposed to be dropping this year as well. And also we've got the standalone multiplayer Factions, which is not, well, presumably Factions, which is not too far behind the release of the remake, apparently. So that could be a pretty chocker year for
for The Last of Us.
Yeah, indeed.
It would make sense for them to get their ducks in a row, right? To kind of like, let everything thrive off the success of everything else. And also, maybe this is just me being cynical, but it feels like there was a lot of heat around The Last of Us Part 2.
Just
that's not controversial to say. Everyone knows that. And one of the parts of this rumor is the idea of a Last of Us 2 director's cut, which would make sense given what happened to Ghost of Tsushima and Death Stranding. But I feel like, especially with the role Neil Druckmann played in some of the controversy, the idea of The Last of Us 2 director's cut being a standalone product is like you're almost putting that game in the crosshair, almost unnecessarily.
Right.
But
imagine if the director's cut drops and all of the Abby stuff is gone.
That's what he cut. Yeah,
that's what he cut. And he comes out and says, "I never wanted it anyway."
I like that idea.
It's a 12-hour game.
But the thing I was going to say is, if you have that director's cut and the Last of Us remake and the factions multiplayer mode, which is probably going to exist as a standalone thing too, and the HBO series kind of like all happening at once, do you just get like a big wave of, well, I was going to say the Last of Us kind of like excitement, but then it also might be the Last of Us sort of tedium as we realise actually we're all getting really excited about the Last of Us because it's back, but there's not that much that's new here other than a TV show and a multiplayer mode. So
it's funny because I don't think I would venture out to the director's cut of Last of Us 2. Like, I probably what my favourite game of all time, possibly. I really, really enjoyed that. I thought it was fantastic. Not a perfect game, don't get me wrong, but really, really enjoyed it. However, that having been said, I don't think I'd want to venture back into that. Like, I've experienced that story. I had a really good time with it. I don't necessarily think I need a director's cut to sort of jump back into it. However, the remake of The Last of Us, I think, is something that I would be keen to sort of to have a go at. It is a little bit of a weird. It's a little bit of a weird thing these days when remakes coincide so like rapidly after the original. I mean, maybe not
yes,
that
I agree.
quickly, but it's going from Resident Evil 1 to a remake is a great remake because it's such a span of time. The technology's come on so far, etc., etc. Going from obviously Last of Us, which wasn't that long ago, to going to the Last of Us remake does seem like it would be a bit odd, but it's still something I want to do. Still something I want to be involved in.
It's like, I think it's longer than I think most people realize, but it still doesn't quite feel long enough. Like this year would be 9 years.
I was going to guess 8. I would have said about 8 years. So 9 years, okay. So
but it still doesn't feel.
The game type as well, like the type of game it is, I think it's not like you can take a 2D game, make it 3D. It's not like you can take a linear game and sort of make it a bit more of an open world kind of game, or you can do a lot with it. It feels like it's going to basically be a remaster, but one that looks incredible because it's actually a remake.
Yeah,
I can't imagine they do too much to change that game.
No, I completely agree. And look, I don't know how many employees Naughty Dog currently have. I just tried to look it up and see if it's on their Wikipedia. I couldn't see it there. But I remember reading Naughty Dog and around the development of Uncharted 4, I believe it was, were the subject of one of the chapters in one of the Jason Schreier's books. I think it was the first one, Blood, Sweat and Pixels, where he looks at different studios and the development of different games and kind of essentially, in some of the cases, it varies from chapter to chapter, but what went wrong or what went right during development and how things could have been improved. And he talks a lot there about that idea of like the chain of command and how that negatively affected the development of Uncharted 4 and how, well, the QA people can't do anything because the gameplay people couldn't do anything because the animators couldn't do anything because the artists couldn't do anything because Neil Druckmann just rewrote the whole scene. Something like that. And that's not me putting hate on Neil Druckmann, but there's a flow chart to game development, and if shit changes at the top, then people are stuck at the bottom, and they would run into a problem where like work would get thrown away because things were being changed. Especially because I don't know if you remember, but like the Last of Us team kind of took on Uncharted after the success of The Last of Us, and Amy Hennig left the company and all that stuff, and that's when Druckmann became the de facto everything Naughty Dog guy and not just The Last of Us guy. There is a part of me that wonders, like, okay, The Last of Us 2 finished, we've got hundreds of employees, a lot of them might not have anything to do for months depending on how long things take. What can we get up and running on really quickly that doesn't need that much oversight from a creative director or even just a regular director or a writer, because the fundamentals, the blueprint is there, and also isn't really a risk, because even if it goes wrong or people aren't that excited about it, it still can't go that wrong. And I think The Last of Us remake ticks that box, where like you can't. You could fuck it up technically, as we've seen happen a couple of times this year. Like, it could be a technical disaster, but it probably won't be, because Sony like to pump money into things and delay things as long as they need to be delayed, which is good. It can't become a bad game because it's a remake of The Last of Us. It doesn't need to be written because it's written. It doesn't need to be directed because it's directed. You don't need performances. You don't need to get anyone into the motion capture studio again because it's all done. And even if it comes out and people are like, oh yeah, but it was only 9 years ago, you probably still sell 1 million copies. And you're like, oh, now we've just got 500 employees and animators and artists and whatever who are way more familiar with the PlayStation 5's framework and can make an even better looking game next because they've just popped their cherry on the PS5. Let's go again.
You might also, I suppose, have with these, if assuming success of the HBO series, you might have and obviously with the PlayStation 5, more units coming out and things, you might just have a whole load of people who were 5 or 6 when the original came out who weren't interested or couldn't play it.
Totally.
Who are now like, I've got a PlayStation 5, I'd love to play a really good game on that. Like,
no, you're right, absolutely. 9 years isn't much for us, but it ages in a lot of gamers.
It really does. It really does. So, hopefully they don't mess up too much, and hopefully it is all of a lovely rip-roaring success for them. I'm looking forward to the HBO series as well. I will say, it could be a complete mess, but it could also be really good. So, I'm hopeful. We touched briefly on Days Gone and talking about Sony Bend and obviously the involvement they've had where they sort of got co-opted to help make the remake. But they have been shown that they're still a little bit pissed off with the entire situation that they had off the back of Days Gone, because, of course, the sequel to Days Gone that they were planning got not even put on the back burner, just got debinned by Sony, I guess. They just sort of said, no thanks, we have no interest in doing that. So recent news has annoyed them, obviously, that Sony and Sucker Punch have been celebrating the fact that Ghost of Tsushima has sold over 8 million copies. Because, of course, Days Gone director Jeff Ross noted that when he left Sony in 2020, Days Gone had already sold over 8 million copies. So it's a little bit of a kick in the teeth, I guess, to have Sony and Sucker Punch sort of patting themselves on the back and saying what a roaring success a game is that sells 8 million when they'd already done that over a year ago. Bless. So he's not too impressed. I think he also says there's been an additional million copies on Steam, which would obviously push them up to more like the 9 million figure. So is this just him being a Mr. Bitterbottom, Jamie, or do you think that this is fair enough?
I think it's a bit of both.
Bloody fly.
Like there's one comment he made where he said local studio management always made us feel like it was a big disappointment. I don't really know what he means by local studio management. Whether like it was a thing of like were they removed from like the kind of the California hub, and that made them feel like some weird extension of Sony that like was the ugly duckling. I don't know.
I definitely remember getting the feeling that it was like they're a bit of a failure.
Yes. Well, I think it's because, again, like, whether this is right or whether this is wrong is up for debate, and these comments have reignited this debate. But, like, I think that there has to be more to a game than how much it sells. Selling a shitload of copies doesn't make a game good. Selling a shitload of copies doesn't mean a game needs to come back or be given more rope or to have a sequel. The weird thing is, though, that Days Gone wasn't a disastrously bad game. It was a game that the game's press, in some cases, ate alive. And I think increasingly over the years, a lot of people have come to think, like, actually, why was it that harshly criticised? A lot of its ideas were derivative. A lot of its ideas were old. And a lot of the jokes that people made when that game was first announced about, it's The Walking Dead meets, Sons of Anarchy. Like, right. It's like, yeah, kinda. And a lot of it's, like its ideas about open world game design weren't that interesting, and it was too long, and it had a lot of characters that weren't very well written and had very disappointing arcs, let's say. Like, it's a game that had something wrong with it, but at the same time, the fact that it was made out to be the poster child of like the first party game that went wrong, and that like Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War and Spider-Man and eventually Ghost of Tsushima, and for some reason even Death Stranding to a certain extent, get to kind of like sit around in a huddle and laugh at Days Gone while it kind of wallows in its own self-pity in the middle of this weird like ring of bullies. it does seem a little bit egregious. I don't think it's that bad, and I think maybe there should have been a Days Gone 2. Maybe they should have been given another shot. But at the same time, I think it's Sony's plug to pull. And if Sony cares about like game reception, if Sony cares about Metacritic scores, if Sony cares about how long a game took to develop or how long it cost relative to how long it should have taken, how much it should have cost, then again, they're the only ones that can make that decision. And like, without sounding too harsh and nothing against this Jeff Ross guy, but like, head of studio behind cancelled game, gets angry. It's not a headline. You still have clowns on YouTube like David Jaffe, who like makes a new YouTube video every day that in some way, shape or form is just him taking out his vitriol at the game industry that left him behind. And I'm not suggesting Jeff Ross is one of these guys, but like, this is the way things go. I'm sorry you made a game that people liked and people want a sequel for, and you're not going to be able to make a sequel for. But like, that's just the way. I don't know. Like, it's just the way it happens. Like, I'm not saying it shouldn't have had one. It's just, I don't know.
It's fun. It's interesting when you talk about like Metacritic scores, because we've known for years that they've had a thing where it's like, if you don't hit a certain score on Metacritic, you don't get bonuses, you don't get this, or you don't get our contract is only fulfilled if you get a certain score. And whilst I don't, on the face of it, I don't like that in some sense. Like, that does seem pretty harsh, because it means like it doesn't matter how well you do, how good your game is. It only matters about the zeitgeist. It only matters about what the critics say at the time your game is released. And there are loads of reasons why your game might hit, a 75 as opposed to an 85, and then that means that you make nowhere near as much money as a studio, and you might not fail, but maybe it feels like a bit of a failure to you because you didn't get where you were supposed to. But at the same time, I can understand Sony's if they have an idea that they need to protect the quality of their first party software. And if a game like Days Gone, if they feel like it is like the things you said, Jamie, if it's derivative, if it's not pushing the boundary, if it feels like a little bit phoned in certain areas, I can absolutely understand why they would say, look, it did well, it sold well, but it is not a game that we want to see another happen again. We're happy with one of them, but we want to draw a line under it and we want to move on, and we think you've got a great team, we can reallocate, we can use in other areas.
Because you just made a very good point, sorry, that I didn't, yes, we're not getting Days Gone 2, but like, Sony Bend didn't shut down. They didn't get 200 people didn't get made redundant. Yes, they temporarily got moved on to a project they didn't want to get moved on, but we now know Sony Bend have moved on to another new IP. They're working on a new game for the PlayStation 5 to be published by Sony. Like, it's a sad ending for people who want to do some weird Zack Snyder shit where they masturbate furiously over something that never existed. But like, the bigger picture, it's not a sad ending.
It's interesting. So I was checking out the Metacritic scores for Ghosts and Days Gone. So Ghost of Tsushima is on an 83 critic score and a 9.1 user score, and Days Gone is a 71 Metacritic score and an 8.4 user score. So they're not, like, by no stretch is Days Gone like being called a bad game. Annoyingly, it's that weird thing of like, people see a 71 and they go, oh, it's average. That's not average. That's good. That is good. That's what you should take from that. That is a good game. I do think, like, when you look at something like Ghost, not only was it a critical success, it was also a commercial success, and that's a double header. Whereas you've got something like Days Gone, which might have been a commercial success, but it wasn't necessarily a critical success. So whilst it's hit one of those marks, it hasn't necessarily hit the other. But yeah, I mean, so this Jeff Ross has said he thinks it's weird that Sony decided not to back a sequel, but I think it kind of must make sense for them, and it's obviously something they've decided to do. I think the idea that some people might have, like a bit of a conspiracy theory, would be Sony don't want to make a Days Gone 2, even though they know it would be a success because reasons, like, which I don't know what the reasons are, but it does seem like that's kind of what some people are alluding to, which would be madness. If Sony thought they could make a Days Gone 2 that was a commercial success that people loved, that did really well, they'd make it. Obviously, there
Yes.
are reasons why they've decided not to go forward with that.
We also, whether it's because of microtransactions or season or even fucking NFTs, like we all pretty much unanimously agree that publishers like to make money, and if they can
do.
make money, they will. Like I completely agree that like there's more going on to a story. Like Sony don't just arbitrarily decide to not make a game that is guaranteed to sell 10 million copies. Because why wouldn't you make a game that's guaranteed to make 10 million copies? There are other forces at play, and they're forces that determine the kind of catalog that they want to produce and the kind of games they want to release and the kind of experiences they want to promote. And Days Gone and subsequently the planned Days Gone 2 didn't fit that. That's just the way it is.
It is. It's the way the cookie crumbles. And do you know what else?
The cookie crumble.
Do you know what else is the way it is, Jamie? That at the 2 hour mark, when we've finished all of our news stories, it's time to put a plug in the podcast.
Perfect. They should have written IGN a bigger check. That's actually my final takeaway. It sucks to be you. Should have been,
Wow.
It's a simple. Jonesy, we all know how the games industry works. Write a bigger check, get a better review. Simple as.
That's as simple as. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled on our channel because we're making a game and it's going to get a 10 out of 10 because we're going to write a fat check. It's going to bounce when IGN try and cash it. But
I've already slept with 6 different game critics, so I'm feeling pretty. Yeah, exactly. There's a bit of
going the extra mile.
I'm not going to say who I'm kind of like battling against, but a bit of one-upsmanship going on. I'm actually gunning for the world record for games critics slept with. Finding Kotaku a bit of a tough nut to crack at the moment, but I'll get there eventually.
I've heard they're all into feet, so maybe just wear some sandals, thongs as the Aussies call them, and wiggle the toes.
There's so many jokes that I'm having to resist the temptation to make right now. Yeah.
I think all that's left for me to do is to remind everybody that you can catch us on YouTube and Twitter. If you want to drop us a comment, you can put it below our YouTube video, or you can reach out to us at Twitter at SuperShowPod. We're also on podcasting platforms if you are watching this right now and you want to listen to it, or if you're listening to it on a podcasting platform and you want to watch it, head over to YouTube. PaisleyRadio.com, and that is Thursdays at 10 if you want to catch us pseudo live. And if you missed that, you can always catch it again the following week, Monday at 10 p.m. And if you would like to join our very exclusive Patreon, head over to patreon.com and become a patron. That is patreon.com/supershow. You can get onto the Discord for as little as $2. We've got some extra content. If you are in the $5 tier or above, you can check out some old school videos that we made back in the day, some behind the scenes stuff. We've got a few spoiler casts on there as well. And of course, the thing everybody wants to see, it is Known Murderer. Another episode, hopefully.
Should we do a Matrix spoiler cast? Do you think people actually want to watch that, or do you think it would just be for us?
I think it would be for us, but I want to do one because it's annoying to kind of go, we can't talk about this. I
really wanted it to be a cultural phenomenon where everyone on our Discord was discussing it, and it's like it turns out the film's been out for 2 weeks. And I've seen one person in our movie channel be like, "Yeah, I watched The Matrix. I didn't like it." And I was like, "Oh, maybe a spoiler cast isn't for everyone."
Let us know in the comments if you would like to. Jamie and I, because Chris has said that he doesn't think he'll be able to see it for a while. If you want to see Jamie and I do a spoiler cast about The Matrix Resurrection, let us know in the comments. I think the only thing left then, Jamie, what are we going to use for our code word so people can show that they stuck with us to the 2 hour mark?
Good question. Good question. I don't know. I mean, what did we do that was funny? I feel like that's the question I have to ask myself at the end of every episode. I don't remember making many jokes this week. I think that's the dilemma I'm currently stuck with. Do you remember any jokes we made?
No.
We could just ask them a question though. We could ask them a question instead then.
I'm always game for a question.
One question that I'm curious to know the answer to. This doesn't have to be the actual thing. It can be an additional addendum to any comment that you like to leave. Is how long do you think we're going to talk about Metroid Dread again next week?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, stick your time down. Stick how many.
And also, I like the idea. Don't give any context. Just write the answer in terms of the amount of time. Don't say what your the time applies to. So I like the idea of Chris listening to some of this podcast, not reaching the end, not knowing what the comments about. So he'll just see like, why is everyone written like 16 minutes and 24 minutes, and then next week we'll find out.
That is perfect. So yeah, drop your time down below. How long do you think we will end up talking about Metroid Dread again next week? So thank you very much for watching. Jamie, thank you very much for being here and chatting with me. And we will see you next time.
Thanks for having me. Bye.